And it is a good evening from Washington because we begin with some breaking news. Check this out. According to Politico, rabid open borders zealot Congressman Luis Gutierrez will not run for re-election from Illinois. Now, the reason for his decision is not immediately clear. It's a little strange, a little odd. Surprise to me, that's for sure, if it's true. We're going to update you if we learn more later in the show. But I remember the last time I remember seeing him as he was being arrested at the White House back in August, of course, representing illegal immigrants, his community, the illegal immigrants that he said he represents. But that is great news. But first, in another story, this is another shocker, racializing the royals. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Harry and Meghan, Princess Diana's youngest son and American actress Meghan Markle, blew Brexit off the front pages today by announcing their engagement after 15 months of dating. They traveled to Africa and found true love.
Hugely refreshing to be able to get to know someone who isn't necessarily within your circle, doesn't know much about me, I don't know much about her. So to be able to start almost afresh, right from the beginning, and getting to know each other step by step. And then taking that huge leap of only 2 dates, and then going effectively on holiday together in the middle of nowhere, and showing a tent together and all that kind of stuff. It was fantastic.
How sweet. And when Buckingham Palace formally announced the Harry Markle engagement today, Prince Charles and the royals couldn't have been more pleased.
Thrilled, thank you very much, to both of them. I hope they'll be very happy indeed, is all I can say.
I always feel like I need a translator. I couldn't quite, he was happy. And you'd expect he's a proud father. But it was the reaction on social media. I was reading some of this on the way into work today, and I was screaming, both laughing and kind of crying. But it was kind of a shocker. Just moments after the engagement was announced, the social media was awash in racial overtones. And this was all because Meghan Markle's father is white and her mother is black. So suddenly, tweets and Facebook posts were harping on her racial identity. Now, warning, you got to forgive me here. There's a lack of basic grammar and punctuation, as in many tweets. Here we go. Some folks in England are about to lose their minds. Meghan Markle is biracial, black mom. She's older than he is, and she's an American actress. Hashtag black royalty. Another one. Good time to remind everyone that Meghan Markle is black, since I know y'all going to try and whitewash the out of her. Another. Meghan Markle's mother, Prince Harry's now future mother-in-law, is a black African-American woman, social worker from L.A. with sister locks. Man, look, if that's blank don't make you smile big, congrats to the royal fam bam. I don't get fam bam. Y'all couldn't be more lucky to get both. Another one. Meghan Markle is white passing. She looks white. She's not even someone that likes Jasmine Sanders, who has light eyes and very light skin, but you can tell is black biracial. I straight up thought that was a tan white woman. Another. How much black is Meghan Markle? I just want to know that so I know how much blackness to expect from this wedding. Is she black enough for the Cupid shuffle wobble? Hashtag royal engagement. Another to torture you with. Y'all, Meghan Markle is of mixed race. We got a black princess. Hashtag Meghan Markle. Well, actually, Meghan Markle will not be a princess. She'll be a duchess. And I know we're fascinated by royalty, but must we transfer our racial hang-ups onto this young, happy couple? Can't we just celebrate and be happy for them for their engagement and leave it at that? And as for the racially obsessed, in point of fact, Markle will not be the first black royal in Europe. That would be this woman, the beautiful Princess Angela of Liechtenstein, who married Prince Maximilian back in 2000. And Meghan Markle's race is probably the least interesting part of this story. Now, why am I saying that? Because it turns out the Queen is permitting Harry to wed not only a divorcee, because Meghan was divorced, but possibly more historically significant, a woman who was raised Catholic. So let's forget about the race of the royal bride or how she identifies. We've had a biracial president of the United States, and we're about to have a biracial member of the English royal family. But not every moment has to be about race. Now let me get back to my Cyber Monday shopping. There's a royal wedding medallion and plate that I can order, and it's apparently 75% off. I don't care about the color of the plate either. And that's the angle. Joining us now to analyze, Horace Cooper. He's the co-chair of Project 21 and from New York. Clay Kane, he's the Sirius XM radio host and Democratic strategist. All right, Horace, let me start with you. Like the morning, going into work, going to do my radio show, and I start seeing, I mean, there were some tweets that were so, I mean, they were so profane, as is Twitter is wont to be, that were so over the top. Like, get ready, bees. This is our bee who's going to be, you know, in Buckingham Palace. I mean, getting a lot of things wrong about that, but why does everything have to be about race here? Why is it relevant to this?
It's not relevant, and it's actually pretty sad and pitiful. Here's the thing. If this were 1955 and I saw some of these kind of comments, I'd go, which segregationist racist said this today? They noticed in the 1940s and the 1950s every single aspect about anybody's race as their primary attribute. It wasn't, is this person going to pay their bill? Is this person going to buy this house and move in and be a good neighbor? It was what color? What color was their grandmother? That kind of weird fixation. And we got away from it, but all of a sudden, progressives have brought it back. And too many times, I don't hear anybody on the left saying, stop that. Don't do that. They condemn a lot of white Americans and many Republicans who weren't even around actively holding office in the South for their silence while this misbehavior was taking place. Well, we're here now. People are around. Why aren't we seeing condemnations? Some of the things you said, I just think that was outrageous. Not just bad, outrageous.
Clay, let's go to you on this because the future Duchess actually has said before, when she was dating Harry, she said she found it disheartening and discriminatory that some in the media were focusing on her racial identity and not just on their relationship because it centered on her racial background. Why the obsession with her race when it's just a happy couple? I mean, aren't we supposed to be about content of our character, not the color of our skin? Well, aren't we there yet?
Well, what you're talking about is a comment she made to the British press because they were calling her something like a LA gangster, that she's straight out of Compton, that she's from South Central. So the British press made her race an issue, and Prince Harry said stop doing that. Listen, I feel like Horace is acting like we are post-racial, that race doesn't exist. For a lot of black mixed-race people in Britain, this is something to be celebrated. You're pulling out some silly tweets from Twitter. I can find tweets from Twitter that are calling Meghan horrible names. This is a good thing. It's to be celebrated. And if you know the history of the royal family, you would know that this is a bit of history. Just like, you know, when you have somebody breaking ground, you can celebrate that. But pulling out random silly tweets off Twitter from somebody, whoever they are, is ridiculous. And Horace always acts like racism is over. It doesn't exist. It does exist. So this is actually celebrating progress.
But what is this? This has nothing to do with racism. But the point here is this has nothing to do with racism at all. This has to do with a happy couple. So when you say you're breaking ground, she wasn't elected. She fell in love with someone. Why is that breaking ground? She seems like a really lovely person.
If you know the history of the royal family, you don't see many black or mixed race people in the royal family. And again, you're not a mixed race person. That's not why Harry married her. That's not why
Prince Harry is marrying her.
It's still symbolic, right? Laura. It's still symbolic, and it's still important. If you don't think it's important, then you're not a black or mixed race person from Britain.
Okay.
It's important.
Wait.
First of all, no, hold on. I have to ask both of you a question. I want to be fair and balanced here. And Horace, there is a sentiment here that certain black people aren't authentically black. I've seen it directed at my old boss, Justice Thomas. I've seen it directed by people like Tom Sowell, other African Americans who don't think a certain way about race or act a certain way. Is there something about being authentically black? Is she not authentically black? I saw that all over social media today.
I think that is the nasty idea that race is who we are and not simply an attribute of who we are. The truth of the matter is, if there were some tweets that happened to say we like the fact that this wonderful woman has this background, and we had read that, we might have said, that's interesting.
There were several
that they
tweets
said
like that, Horace.
But
there were several tweets like that.
My point is, there's been no condemnation of the kinds of comments that have no basis in reality and show a fixation on race. And we are never going to get to the point where people are human beings as long as we revel in this fixation.
Listen.
Clay, let's give you the last word.
Okay. Acting like race doesn't exist is not going to make race go away. It's not going to make racism go away. We have to be able to see color and accept it, see color and talk about it. And acknowledging that she is a black mixed race woman is not a bad thing. I don't know why that threatens you or makes you uncomfortable or scares you. It's not. It's a good thing to be celebrated. It's progress in the royal family, and for a lot of black mixed race people in Britain, this is a good sign. It's a good thing. And maybe you just can't understand that or relate to that.
I can't understand a racial fixation, and that's what we're seeing.
Celebration is not fixation, Horace. Celebration is not fixation. No, it's not. Saying that she is a black mixed race woman in the royal family is not fixation, and you can't compare it to 1950.
That drove segregation by saying the primary thing about a person is their race.
I don't think that's what she wants.
No, I don't think she wants that either. I don't think she wants that either.
She's just a young woman who's getting married.
Exactly, and she's talked about her race.
But why is so much in America? A lot of this came out of America. Why are so many
and the British press is too, Laura.
And a lot of these people are in the Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson race-focused mindset.
Al Sharpton didn't say anything.
Why are we placing their hang-ups on this happy couple? They're happy because they're in love.
Absolutely.
I imagine Prince Harry is in love with her. It doesn't have anything to do with her skin color. It's that he fell in love with her.
Again, celebration is not fixation.
Yeah,
celebration is not fixation.
All right, both of you.
I'll
It's
see
great
you next
to have
time.
you on. We'll have another conversation about this, I'm sure. And coming up, Democrats are mostly staying quiet about John Conyers' sexual harassment scandal. What is that all about? That debate ahead. Welcome back to the Ingraham Angle. As the John Conyers harassment scandal engulfs the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi is trying to put out the PR fire with just a little touch of gasoline.
We are strengthened by due process. Just because someone is accused, and was it one accusation? Is it two? I think there has to be. John Conyers is an icon in our country. He has done a great deal to protect women. He will do the right thing.
And is the right thing what? Resign?
He will do the right thing in terms of what he knows about his situation, that he's entitled to due process, but women are entitled to due process as well.
I can't even diagram those sentences. I try every day, but it never works. Pelosi's comments are creating the obvious blowback, not only from Republicans, but even also from some progressives. Democrats are fearing that the leader's comments reveal a party more concerned maybe with politics than protecting women. And let's face it, for all their war on women talk, the Democrats' message, in some cases, is just always talk.
As the president declared in his State of the Union address, when women succeed, America succeeds. That's not just a phrase, it's a statement of fact. House Democrats agree. When women succeed, America succeeds. That was our bus trip. That's our agenda.
We know one thing for sure, that when women succeed, America succeeds. And when women succeed, as my colleague said, the world succeeds.
That's nice. And now Pelosi has put out a statement late today trying to walk some of those other comments on Meet the Press back. But the question remains, do the Democrats really stand with women? Or only when it might be politically convenient? Well, joining us now to discuss is Scott Bolden, former chairman of the Washington, D.C. Democratic Party, and Congressman Steve Russell, a Republican from Oklahoma. Even Gregory Meeks has said that he thinks John Conyers, he thought he should have stepped down as ranking member. But I got to go to you, Scott, on this. Nancy Pelosi, I couldn't even follow what she was saying in that appearance in Meet the Press. And look, the Republicans have trouble on some of these Sunday shows as well. But she said, and we cut this out of the soundbite, what she said, she's not really familiar with the cases. She gets really familiar really fast with allegations against Republicans. This is John Conyers, who has been in Congress for 52 years. And yet Nancy is willing to, or he needs due process and all due process. So that's It's nice to hear finally. Men get due process.
Well, but the Republicans and the Democrats on the Hill believe that as well. Not just due process, but the Ethics Committee should go there. I think what Nancy Pelosi, in her inartful way, was trying to say is that he can be both of those things. He can be an icon, he can fight for women, and he can have these sexual allegations. None of it's good, none of it's appropriate, and I also think that behind the scenes, before the deal was cut, she knew that he was going to step down, which he did the next day, and if she's walking back, it's only because she was inartful about it. But the fact of the matter is, she supports Congressman Speyer's bill, she supports adding resources to the ethics investigators, she supports non-disclosures going away, and she supports that the public funds should not go to settle some of these lawsuits. And so those are the most important things.
Congressman, Nancy Pelosi had never talked about this shush fund, as we call it here. Never talked about it before. Settlement for all these bad actors. Don't know who these people are still, and so now it's kind of getting some traction. We talked about it, I think, first on cable, and now it's everywhere. But John Conyers, he's been in there for 52 years. This is like a lifetime appointment in Congress. That's a separate issue, obviously, but Nancy Pelosi's willing to give iconic status to him. So if you're an icon, you can get away with this stuff and just resign from your ranking position on a committee because you're an icon. So the context matters. I don't think it mattered much with Justice Thomas when they were accusing him of things. That didn't matter.
You know, I'm glad to see that we've got Ms. Pelosi that cares about due process now rather than just statements. I think that that's very important to establish. But look, I think where the American public is outraged is there's allegedly $16 million of government taxpayer money that's going to hide.
Did you know about this, Congressman?
Absolutely not. I'm on oversight and government.
Anything else that you guys don't know about up there?
I'm on the oversight and government.
It's like it's only $17 million bucks.
But here's what I do know about you. Even if that money were set aside, you can't use your MRA office funds to pay off somebody for some allegation. This has to be looked into.
My question is,
absolutely.
Why aren't, if he's admitted these settlements already? Al Franken's admitted his conduct. Like, I'm not for...
Well, the photos kind of...
Yeah, he already came out and admitted. But why, if there's such a concern about women, we're always concerned about women in general. Women's reproductive rights, women this, we're for women, we're violence against women. But here we have sexual harassment against women. And why aren't both parties getting together and saying, guys, you admitted to this conduct. That's it. I mean, that's it. That's it. You admitted. That's it. Both parties should get. This is a part of bipartisanship that should be obvious at this point, shouldn't it? And I'll let you go on this, Scott.
Yeah, I certainly think
so. Not the context of his iconic status.
Yeah, but Laura, the fact that he's iconic status, he can be iconic. And he can be a sexual abuser.
Clarence Thomas was only the second black Supreme Court justice. Another time, another place. He never got any of it. He never, ever got any of the context.
He just now got into the African American.
Well, he got no context. He got no. He may
not. Another time, another place. Well, I'll tell you what. Listen, let's be transparent about it, right? And all Democrats, all Republicans, either send it to the Ethics Committee or not. But let's start with Donald Trump. But let's start with Donald Trump. Why isn't the Ethics Committee investigating Donald Trump?
He didn't admit that he denies his conduct.
No, he denied. He admitted
it. He denies that he said something he shouldn't have said.
He admitted it.
Which I condemned at the time. Right.
Exactly. But so why has he not been investigated?
So you want to undo the election? That's not going to happen. Let's talk in the world of reality. The world of reality.
Why should any Democrats be investigated? Or Republicans, like Joe Barton. Why should they be investigated also? If you're not going to start with the president.
We can take a typical play out of the communist playbook, which says admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations.
For both Democrats and Republicans?
Sure, but here we have a situation where you've got Senator Franken, who has photographs that, okay, you know,
before he was
comments and rhetoric okay, but now we're going to use a double standard with other people that are seeking election that are allegations. Wrong is wrong. On there, we're in violent agreement. But here's the thing. You cannot use taxpayer funds to hush people up.
We've established that.
We both agree on that.
But I think there is a raging double standard.
There is.
A lot of congresswomen and congressmen who claim to be all pro-women, they're all violence against. I hear that old trope, war against women. But when there are individual women who have been in situations where they feel powerless and they feel like they can't act they're stuck. They have no voice except through this ridiculous panel that was set up, and Congressman, you didn't even know about it. I mean, I'm not blaming you, but We didn't know about it.
Yeah,
that's insane.
In the Republican
and
conference,
it makes
we
people
don't get
wonder
briefed
who are
on our
watching
slush
Fox
funds,
right now. Makes people wonder who are watching Fox right now, what else doesn't Congress know about? How much other money is being spent? So I don't know, but it was looking around. I don't know where. That's crazy.
It is.
That is insane.
Well, and it needs to be investigated, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
All right, guys.
But I think Democrats and Republicans have got to have credibility, and that credibility starts with both of them being investigated, including Donald Trump.
So you want Trump investigated?
I do. He's got 19 sexual cases against him, or accusations, and he admitted it on the air. Not what he was going to do, but what he'd done to women already.
You have language.
We're out of time.
You have language and you have actions.
And the press likes to say the president's ratings are low, but they sure aren't as low as some in the mainstream media. We'll tell you about that when we come back. The press has no trouble attacking the First Lady or the President, of course. They're good at that. But when he fights back, suddenly the First Amendment is in peril. Are Trump's attacks on the press really an attack on our democratic norms? Daily Beast editor-in-chief and CNN political analyst John Avlon seems to think so.
We shouldn't normalize the spectacle because it is a serious constant attack at our democratic norms, going after the press, going after individual entities.
Joining me now on this newest bout of hyperbole is Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, his first time on the Ingraham angle. Hi, Brit. How are you?
Hi, Laura. You got me up past my bedtime.
It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. So,
thank you.
Is our First Amendment in peril because Donald Trump sent out that tweet about CNN International and his comments about fake news?
Well, certainly not because of that tweet, and I would say, broadly speaking, that Trump's criticisms of the media, which have been, pretty consistent, pretty frequent, still haven't added up to anything that would threaten our First Amendment freedoms. We in the media in this country enjoy a level of freedom and protection that is rarely available, almost nowhere else on earth, and we're pretty invulnerable to government officials and politicians. There's not much they can do to us. The Supreme Court is there to safeguard our rights and has consistently done so to the point where, for example, if someone wants to sue for libel, they have to prove that the offending party has committed either a reckless or a willful act of falsehood. That's pretty hard to prove. In my own career, Laura, I've been spied on by the CIA. I've been sued for libel. I've been criticized by name. And here I am after all these years. And that's because we're protected in this country. There's just not much Donald Trump can do to the media.
I was sued for libel when I was 19, Brett, at Dartmouth. The professor sued me. I learned a lot about the First Amendment, but ultimately unsuccessful. But you're right. I was thinking about Obama, President Obama, and he had a seemingly very chummy relationship with the mainstream press, oftentimes. But then we had the James Rosen controversy. Cheryl Atkinson, the journalist, said her computer was actually hacked into. His comments about Fox News, other supporters' comments about talk radio, routinely belittling Fox and conservative internet, websites and so forth. So I could make the argument that in maybe a kind of sophisticated way, or not so sophisticated in some way, the Obama administration was much more hostile to an unfriendly, critical press.
I would agree with that, Laura. I think that what was done in the case of James Rosen was grossly improper. It should not have happened. It was an abuse, and yet in the end, James Rosen is still working at Fox News and doing better than ever. And Cheryl Atkinson is certainly out there still. We are just in too well protected a position to be knocked off by or thrown off our work by government. Not only that, it's not just that we have these protections, but we in the media also have power. So we're pretty safe.
Well, they don't like to be crushed. They don't like to be crushed. Yeah, sorry, Brett, but a lot of people in the media, especially CNN, MSNBC, they don't want to be criticized. The idea that anyone's going to call their wisdom into question or their prognostication abilities into question, they don't like that. They never liked it. They never wanted to be called out, not by other media outlets, media research center, whether it's a website or it's a talk radio. They don't like that. They don't like that. They want to be the invulnerable, invincible folks. And I'm talking about some of our other friends on other networks. I mean, we don't always get it right, but you're not immune to criticism either. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. I want to talk a little bit about President Trump's comment today at that Code Talkers ceremony and play the soundbite. Let's watch.
You were here long before any of us were here, although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas. But you know what? I like you because you are special.
Now, Brett, I'm not sure why the president had to bring up Elizabeth Warren. I mean, we're not really in the campaign, not in 2020 yet. I mean, maybe it was on his mind because of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issue. I don't know. We're going to handle that later in the show. But what about that moment? They're going crazy. The left's going crazy about that.
I agree with you, Laura. I don't think it was a very gracious thing for him to do, and he does a lot of ungracious things. Grace is not his strength. He's ungenerous to people. He's constantly carping about people who are much smaller than he is. I'm not sure what that accomplishes. But I don't think it's a threat, and I don't think it's racist. Your earlier segment brought this to light as well. That term is flung around with abandon today, and it is a tragedy because the great achievement of the civil rights movement, greater even than the important laws that were passed, were the consensus that it brought about that racism is wrong and not to be tolerated. And an overwhelming, prohibitive majority of Americans feel that way. And for that term to be flung around with abandon is an abuse. And there's been much too much of it. And I think that for Elizabeth Warren to call it a racist slur is unfair. It's wrong. She's a big girl. What he said was essentially harmless, if crude. My view of that is just move on.
All right, Brett. I really appreciate it. I mean, it is kind of funny, but it's probably not necessary. And I've seen President Trump be incredibly gracious toward people. And he is very gracious, and he can turn on the charm when he wants to. But there, he had to hit the dig into. Well, at least he didn't call her Pocahontas, Britt. Look at it that way. It could have been even more perhaps ungracious. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. And straight ahead, absolute chaos at a powerful federal agency, one you might not know a lot about, that claims to be independent and nonpartisan, and yet it seems to be the exact opposite. Also claims to work for the American consumers, but did it ever really do that? A full report when we return. Don't you think it's kind of hard to find ways to attack First Lady Melania Trump? She's poised, she's dignified, incredibly gracious. And attacking her shoes, well, they tried that. That didn't work. So the media's latest tack is to insinuate that the First Lady is like Eva Gabor in Green Acres. In this latest hit piece on FLOTUS, Vanity Fair writer Sarah Ellison claims that a source told her that Mrs. Trump never wanted to be First Lady because of the intense exposure, as though she were some wilting wallflower or something. Then Ellison kind of jumps the shark by leaping to this conclusion. There may never have been a First Lady less prepared for or suited to the role. This isn't something she wanted, and it isn't something he ever thought he'd win, one longtime friend of the Trumps told me. She didn't want this come hell or high water. I don't think she thought it was going to happen. Ellison also claims, get this, one told me that it is old news that she and her husband live essentially separate lives. So not only does Vanity Fair suggest the First Lady is miserable, ill-suited for the job, but also that her marriage is on the rocks. In a statement today, the First Lady's office slammed the story as salacious and filled with false assertions. And as far as not liking the role, Melania looked pretty perfect today, greeting children at the White House. Just listen to what one child said to her.
He seriously looks like an angel. Very nice. Yeah. He really does look like an angel.
Well, Vanity Fair probably won't cover that. She really looks like an angel, right? Well, looks like she's really hating that job. I don't think so. It's a rank partisan agency masquerading as a protector of American consumers, some are saying. Well, this barely known agency operates in near independence of your elected officials, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I know that's a mouthful. Tonight has two bosses. And it all got started on Friday when the CFPB director, Richard Cordray, an Obama appointee, announced his resignation and said his chief of staff, Leandra English, would temporarily replace him. But President Trump had other plans and named his budget director, Mick Mulvaney, to fill the post until a permanent replacement could be named. But Ms. English is not going quietly, filing a lawsuit that claims the job is still hers. So there are currently two people claiming to be the rightful leader of this big Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's unbelievable. So what exactly is the CFPB? Well, it was created by the infamous 2010 Dodd-Frank bill, and the agency targets financial companies engaged in what they believe is unfair and predatory, deceptive, abusive practices. Here's what Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren said about the CFPB way back in 2013.
What we know for sure is now this agency is here to stay. No more clouds over what it legally is entitled to do. No more attacks that say maybe we're going to be able to undercut it in this way or weaken it in that way. We got a full-fledged watchdog, the one we fought for, and he's going to be there to fight for us. I love it.
I have two watchdogs. I love watchdogs. But the employees of the CFPB aren't just a bunch of fair-minded, nonpartisan group of bureaucrats. According to stats dug up by the Washington Examiner, since its founding, the CFPB employees have given money to Democrats 593 times and only once to a Republican. Joining us now for reaction from Wisconsin, Republican Congressman Sean Duffy. He sits on the, I think on the Finance Committee, right? And here in Washington, Robert Weissman, president of the advocacy group Public Citizens. Congressman, let's start with you. It's a watchdog. It's returned all this money, billions and billions, what, $14 billion to the consumers. So, why all the chaos over there? And why do Republicans think it's just, it's just up to no good?
So first off, we're shining a light on the CFPB, but those of us on the Financial Services Committee, we've been dealing with this for the last 7 years. Mick Mulvaney used to be on that committee with us. And Laura, you have an agency that can draw $600 million from the Federal Reserve. They don't get money from Congress. And you have one very powerful director. And as you mentioned in your intro, you have an agency of thousands of little Elizabeth Warrens that are just as radical and just as progressive as she is. And they're wreaking havoc on the free enterprise system all across America. And this is an agency that has to get under control. And all Americans believe in consumer protection. But when you have an agency that's promoting a progressive agenda and not protecting consumers, that's where we all have issue.
Robert, that's a big difference. 593 donations to Democrats, one to a Republican. I mean, I don't care what party you're from. Like, how can you, with a straight face, say that's a nonpartisan, independent agency that's just a watchdog?
Well, I think you have to look at what the agency's been doing. And what it's been doing is what it's supposed to do. It's been protecting consumers. It's issued more than $12 billion in fines and charges that have been paid back to consumers. Almost 30 million Americans have directly benefited from exposure of rip-offs and cheating by big banks and other financial institutions. It's deterred billions more in rip-offs. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The banks have tons of their own regulatory agencies. They got Goldman Sachs running the Treasury Department, Goldman Sachs running the SEC. They got Goldman Sachs, One West, as the comptroller of the currency. This is the one agency that's supposed to work for consumers, and it's been doing the job.
So there's a guy who used to be head of enforcement, one of the enforcement attorneys, Ron Rubin, who talked to us today, and he said he was actually in meetings where he would hear some of the top people at the CFPB talking about appointees they might bring in, new hires. One guy's like, well, he's a good liberal. Then he's like, oh, I was just kidding. There's a gatekeeper there about the type of people you're going to hire and the type of people you're going to bring in. And they might not have it written down, but it sure seems like a political litmus test that's unspoken for you to get through the door at the CFPB now. Maybe not in the early days, but certainly now.
Well, I think you have an agency that's been doing its job with, unfortunately...
So only with Democrats, like for mostly Democrats. They're doing their job with mostly Democrats.
I have no idea.
Democrats the only gatekeepers for the people?
No, I have no idea about the...
You don't know? That's 593.
But what I do know,
if you're protecting them, you should know.
What I do know is Mick Mulvaney says he wants to destroy the agency. He thinks the agency is a sick joke, and he's going to turn it over
Congressman, is it
effectively
a sick
to Wall
joke?
Street.
Is it a sick joke, this agency? Can you defund it in Congress? Trump can't shut it down. He can't drain the swamp totally, right, here?
So, Laura, the next director can actually request not $600 million, they could request $10 million. So they can actually force Democrats to the table to reform this agency. But we had a bill that would have absolutely restructured the way the CFPB works. And the largest banks in America were opposed to that bill. And the small community banks and credit unions that serve the community where I live, they're the ones who supported this reform to the CFPB. What they've done is they've increased the cost of credit, whether you get a mortgage or an auto loan. They've caused small community banks and credit unions to go out of business or consolidate. That hurts the most rural parts of America. And here they say, we want to be isolated from the Congress and the American people. Well, if you're doing the good work of the American people, Laura, you shouldn't have to be isolated. The American people will applaud you. But if you have a progressive liberal agenda, you have to then be protected from the American people because they're going to shut you down. And that's why Elizabeth Warren had to separate them from Congress and Congress's ability to fund them because they knew it had a radical agenda.
So, Robert, do you think there should be any reforms to this at all?
Any reforms to the agency? I think you know what you should do, Laura? I think you and the viewers should go look at the website of the CFPB, and you'll see an agency.
We'll run to that tonight, I'm sure. But go ahead.
It's a website that doesn't look like other governmental agencies. No. It's actually clear.
The Federal Reserve pays for this, right? They kind of insulate themselves because the Federal Reserve profits pay for it, correct?
They're funding it
more
from
from
directly
the
from the Fed.
yeah.
Absolutely. But they're doing their job, and they explain what they're doing. They're incredibly transparent about what's going on. And I think if people go there and see the plain English explanation of what's going on, they're going to like it.
Small community banks, what the congressman said, he's been studying this.
The
for
small
years.
community banks.
They don't have any problem with this. They're not being hurt. The credit's not being squeezed on their side.
No, actually, big banks are at record profits, and small banks are doing pretty well. The CFPB doesn't have primary jurisdiction over banks for less than $10 billion.
Really quick, Sean.
Listen, it's the small banks' biggest complaint is the CFPB. The rules and regulations pass to them, and big banks can deal with a lot of rules and regulations. Small banks cannot, and that's why they have to consolidate or go out of business, and that's why you hurt rural America, and that's why rural America came out in force to support Donald Trump.
All right, well, we made some progress understanding a really complex federal agency, and it's an independent agency, and a lot of people don't even know it exists, frankly, so thanks to both of you. And speaking of free speech, concern is growing that China may actually be silencing Chinese students at American universities, pouring billions of dollars into education in this country. So is this a Chinese Trojan horse infiltrating American higher education? It's a stunning story and an uplifting NFL story. At least it happened at a game. That too when we return. All right, now this is a story you haven't heard much about, but I'm going to ask a question. You got to think about it. Is China hindering free speech on American soil? How can that be? Well, Wang Dan, who's a former leader of the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests and founder of an independent think tank that promotes democratic reforms in China, says the Chinese Communist Party is extending its surveillance of critics abroad, reaching into Western academic communities and silencing visiting Chinese students here. Through a campaign of fear and intimidation, Beijing is hindering free speech in the United States and in other Western countries on college campuses. We have enough problem with free speech on college campuses. Now we got it from China. Joining us now for analysis from Florida is Stephen Mosier, a China expert and author of Bully of Asia. And here with me in Washington, Shirkan Ali Khan, who's a graduate student at Catholic University and a spokesperson for persecuted Chinese civil rights activist Gwen Guangcheng. Let's start with you, Steve. You've been covering China for years. I know none of this is surprising to you. I think a lot of Americans, however, are shocked to know that Red China, and yes, I still call them that, Red China has such a long arm into the U.S. academic community. Tell us how they're intimidating speech on campus.
Well, Laura, it has a long arm into the U.S. academic community. The arm is getting longer all the time. I'm kind of the poster child for the persecution by China of American academics and American students who criticize the Chinese regime for human rights. You recall we've talked before about my reporting on forced abortions in China, which led the Chinese government to demand of Stanford, demand, not ask, that I be expelled from the university, and Stanford complied. That was a long time ago. China is larger and more powerful today than it was then. It is much more active in suppressing speech.
Yeah, they have more money. They have
the
a lot. They have a lot more money. And Shirkan, specifically, what's happening on the college campuses?
So, college students, most of them come from the white-collar class in China, and most of those people are employed by the Chinese state-owned enterprises. And those students feel pressure when they're here in the States to self-censor. They know that their social media is monitored, and that has a very strong chilling effect.
So I was looking at a chart, I think the Wall Street Journal did it, of the number of Chinese students in 2000, come to the United States in 2000, versus today. And I believe the number today was over 500,000 in the United States. Does that sound right to you? I think
I've seen at least over 350,000.
The chart goes like this.
Yes,
the bar graph. Oh, there it is.
Correct.
So you got to see it there. It's on the right. Thank you.
Yes.
So there we go. So it's on the right. That's where we are essentially today, at top.
Yeah.
A lot of Chinese students here. More surveillance through social media, more pressure on the upper class, especially Chinese, to abide by the communist dictates. Now, does this happen in pressure on their families at home? Does this happen in subsidies being removed, educational subsidies? And then how does it spill over into the other parts of campus?
Yeah, well, it's a very sophisticated strategy where they monitor social media. And they know that they have, they up the pressure where the students know that they might get a call from their parents saying someone from the government came to visit us, or their parents might be employed by a bank, which is also owned by the government. Or if they really step out of line, the government would actually imprison their family.
How do we allow this, though? I mean, this is, Stephen, I got to go back to you on this. This is shocking to most people, because we are a free country. We hear about Russia collusion, Russia's attempt to, supposed collusion with Trump, which is ridiculous, and the attempt to influence our election. I'm sure they probably did. But what about this? This is China's attempt through setting up all these Confucian institutes, Chinese studies at universities. Some of them are cool, I imagine. But boy, they have an enormous amount of power and money operating right now in the United States for a purpose. They have a purpose. What's behind that purpose?
Well, behind that purpose is the idea of controlling all discussion, all debate about China. And they've set up hundreds and hundreds of Confucian institutes around the country. And they go to a college or university, offer them millions of dollars in return for room on campus, so the institutes are on campus. They're named, of course, after Confucius, and not, say, Chairman Mao Zedong, who's one of the great mass murderers of human history, having murdered 65 million people. But there are certain things that are not allowed to be talked about at the Confucian Institute. You can't talk about the 3 Ts, they're called. You can't talk about Taiwan. You can't talk about Tibet. You can't talk about Tiananmen. You can't talk about Taiwan because Taiwan is free. Tibet wants to be free.
They shut it down. They do the same thing in Hollywood. There's certain movies aren't going to be made. Google, Facebook, all shut out. We're going to do a lot more on this. Thank you both for joining us. And finally tonight,
thank you.
A feel-good story amid a storm of bad ones in one particular sports league. Well, the old joke used to go, the NFL stands for the No Fun League. And that's been especially true this year. Players on their knees. You see all the empty stadiums this past weekend? It continues 12 weeks into this. Falling revenues. And Roger Goodell, the commissioner, who wanted $49 million a year salary and health care for life for his family. But there was one really redeeming image on Sunday. Check this out. 98-year-old Pearl Harbor survivor Mickey Ganich was ready to take the field. Age be damned. A well-known local figure, a diehard Raiders fan, Ganich was honored in the pregame ceremony during the Raiders' salute to service. They're doing a lot of salute to service now because I think the blowback they're getting. Ganich was 22 and stationed at Pearl Harbor, getting ready to play some football with his pals from the battleship Pennsylvania when the Japanese attacked and changed the course of history. And, of course, this honor represents the latest in a long line of these last-ditch efforts from the league to save face in the wake of all this Colin Kaepernick controversy. That's the kind of kneeling that we love to see. I loved it. It was an amazing image. God bless him. He's the best of what this country represents. And the league is suffering, as they should, for what they allowed to happen for all this time. Well, that's all the time we have left tonight. Shannon Bream is up next. Miss Shannon, take it away.
Good evening, Laura. All right, here is what we have coming up tonight.